You do not have the right to commit war crimes.
I am Mustafa. I'm from Gaza. I am scared. I am hungry. No food, no home, no life. I need it. Thank you.
In a world that claimed never again, Gaza burns again. This is not just a story of war. It is a story of power unbound, of civilians trapped, and of words that became weapons.
We are looking for babies, but there is no babies left.
Tonight, we tell the story of Gaza, not only as a battlefield, but as a crime scene.
Hamas launched the biggest ever terror attack.
The tide turns, history written in fire. On October 7, 2023, a date now seared into history, fighters from Hamas breached the heavily fortified Israeli border fence and launched an unprecedented attack. Within hours, hundreds of Israeli civilians lay dead. Entire kibbutzim wiped out, 1,200 lives lost, more than 240 hostages taken. The world watched in shock. It was an act of terror, brutal and indiscriminate. But beneath the horror lay a longer story. For 16 years, Gaza had been blockaded by Israel and Egypt, its 2.3 million people penned into what the UN once called the world's largest open-air prison. Unemployment hovered over 50%. Clean water was almost gone. Electricity rationed to just hours a day. Nearly half the population survived only on aid. The years before 2023 had been marked by repeated Israeli bombardments, settler violence in the West Bank, and military raids on holy sites. In May 2021, over 260 Palestinians were killed in another devastating assault on Gaza. In early 2023, Israeli police raided Al-Aqsa Mosque during Ramadan, sparking outrage across the region. To many in Gaza, Hamas's attack, however horrific, was born of desperation, a rebellion against a siege that had already stolen their future. But what followed was not defense, it was destruction.
Well, what is not clear is that you have also, in going after Hamas in Gaza, massacred between 70 and 100,000 Palestinians.
The hammer falls. A disproportionate war. Within hours of Hamas's attack, Israel's response began, and it did not stop. Jets screamed over the strip, dropping bombs with ferocity unmatched in decades. Apartment blocks collapsed like sandcastles, neighborhoods reduced to ash, families buried alive. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant appeared on television and declared, "We are fighting human animals, and we are acting accordingly. There will be no electricity, no food, no fuel." And that was no metaphor. It became policy. Electricity was cut, water was shut off, fuel stopped. Aid trucks were blocked at the border. By January 2024, more than 29,000 airstrikes had been launched. Schools, hospitals, UN shelters. Even clearly marked aid convoys were bombed. People fled to so-called safe zones, only to find those bombed too. By the time the dust settled, Gaza City was gone, a skeletal ruin. Experts began warning of war crimes, but as the months wore on, the accusations grew sharper. Crimes against humanity, ethnic cleansing, perhaps even genocide. A humanitarian nightmare, starvation as a weapon. By spring 2024, Gaza was not just under attack, it was starving. Wheat fields lay in ashes, bakeries were bombed, markets emptied, water tanks shattered. Children began to die not from bombs, but from thirst and hunger. In April, the UN declared parts of northern Gaza officially in famine. Mothers diluted powdered milk to stretch supplies. Some boiled grass and animal feed into soup. At Al-Shifa Hospital, a mass grave was uncovered, bodies hastily buried, many with hands bound. Eyewitnesses described Israeli soldiers firing into crowds waiting for food. Drone footage later confirmed aid seekers killed at what was supposed to be a humanitarian drop site.
Using starvation to pursue political objectives is a war crime.
Legal scholars warned, starvation as a weapon of war is not collateral damage, it is a crime. But still, the bombs fell, and still the world hesitated. The language of genocide. Words that reveal intent. As the rubble piled higher, the world began to hear what Israeli officials were saying, words impossible to ignore. On October 13th, Israeli President Isaac Herzog told reporters, "It's an entire nation out there that is responsible. This rhetoric about civilians not involved, it's absolutely not true." Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich tweeted, "Flatten it. Gaza must be smaller at the end of this war. There are no innocents." Knesset member Tali Gottlieb thundered in parliament, "I want to see a mushroom cloud over Gaza." And former intelligence chief Amos Yadlin declared, "There is no such thing as uninvolved civilians. The children will grow up to be terrorists."
The circumstances are terrible, and that statement by Finance Minister Smotrich is outrageous.
These were not just statements, they were signals. They erased the line between combatant and civilian, between military target and child. They dehumanized an entire population. When South Africa filed its genocide case against Israel at the International Court of Justice in January 2024, these quotes became Exhibit A, proof of intent. UN experts called it a textbook case of genocide unfolding before our eyes. Even a leaked U.S. State Department memo, revealed in mid-2025, admitted, Israel has likely committed systematic violations of international law and the Genocide Convention.
The International Criminal Court has issued arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant for alleged war crimes in Gaza.
The world responds. Justice, protest, and culture. By mid-2024, the reckoning arrived. The International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, charging them with war crimes and crimes against humanity. Prosecutor Karim Khan declared plainly, "No leader is above the law." Israel denounced the charges, but the world did not look away. In Dublin, the Irish Parliament suspended all military cooperation with Israel. In Barcelona, contracts were severed. In cities from Cape Town to Berlin to New York, millions marched, demanding accountability. And on the stages of culture, the anger was just as loud. At Glastonbury 2024, the British punk rap duo Bob Vylan stood before thousands. With fists raised, they roared, "Free Palestine, end the slaughter." This is genocide and silence is complicity. The crowd answered with deafening cheers. That clip, raw and unfiltered, became an anthem, played and replayed on social media and at protests worldwide. Justice was speaking. But Gaza still suffered.
The things that are really shocking to me is the repeated posting of videos of detainee humiliation.
The deeper scars and wider front lines. It is July 2025 and Gaza keeps burning. The ceasefire still does not come. Talks brokered by Qatar, Egypt, and the United States keep stalling. The bombs still fall, the children still queue for water, and the dead keep being pulled from rubble. But the damage is more than what cameras can show. Inside Gaza, a silent epidemic of trauma spreads. Children wake screaming from nightmares, some too shocked to speak at all. A lost generation grows up among shattered schools and mass graves, learning their first words under the whistle of bombs.
It has to meet the requirements of international humanitarian law. It must distinguish between civilians and military targets. It doesn't allow you to use famine as a weapon of war. It doesn't allow you to forcibly deport or evacuate large numbers of people.
These are not mistakes. These are intentions spoken and acted on. The disproportionate assault continues hour by hour. Massive bombs on refugee camps, white phosphorus burning on residential streets, water and power cut completely. And now, even beyond Gaza, the hate is spilling outward. In the streets of Paris and Berlin, Palestinian and Jewish youths fight each other in the open. In London, protesters clash violently in front of embassies, punches and flags flying together. In New York subways, people scream and beat one another over Palestine and Israel. Isolated attacks on mosques and synagogues increase across Europe and America. Communities fracture. Friends and families stop speaking. The war's fire leaps oceans and burns everywhere it lands. The children still stand in line at the water tanks, their bodies thin and trembling. The wounded still dig through rubble for the faces of their families. The shells still fall into the last schools and clinics. And even inside Israel, dissent cracks the facade.
There is no question, not about the savagery, not about the brutality, not about the malicious intentions of Hamas. There's no question about that. And we obviously had and still have the full right of self-defense. Again, that's beyond any question. But this doesn't give us the right to, obviously not to commit war crimes. And also not to sink to the level of the terrorist organizations.
Israeli soldiers, some refusing orders, others leaking footage of abuses, speak out anonymously. Families of hostages gather outside the Knesset shouting, "You're killing them too!" In Tel Aviv, protests swell against Netanyahu's government. At the International Court of Justice, hearings drag on in The Hague. Judges from around the world sit under the blue flag, reviewing pages of testimony, videos of bombings, satellite images of destruction, intercepts of officials saying, "Erase Gaza." Prosecutors cite evidence of war crimes, apartheid, genocide. Israel's lawyers deny everything, but the world watches and remembers. The economy of Gaza lies in ruins. Fishing boats sink under the blockade. Fields are poisoned, trees uprooted, factories pulverized. Bread costs 10 times what it did before. Mothers barter jewelry for a handful of flour. Isolated attacks on Arab and Jewish families rise. Windows smashed, threats painted on doors. But alongside the hate, solidarity grows too.
He is talking in a genocidal language about kicking all the Palestinians out. I have resisted going as far as you have done in your criticism of the Israeli government. I resist no more.
Even the media narrative is shifting. Editors at once pro-Israel papers now publish headlines like, "When does defense become destruction?" Anchors once silent now ask questions about intent, proportionality, and humanity. Piers Morgan, once dismissive, now demands, "How many children have to die before you stop?" This is not just a war. It is an annihilation, written right now, in fire, in famine, and in silence. Now the world must decide, is this a warning or is this a crime? And one child's voice rises above the silence, soft but unbroken. We are still here, and we remember everything.